Hey, Michael, thanks for joining today.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Great to be
Abs-
here.
Absolutely. No, I'm excited, man. So, with yourself, I kind of want to jump right in. You're a speaker. Everything I know about you, you're really dedicated to people's growth and kind of, letting their inner light shine, if I may say, kind of put it that way. And we'll definitely dive into all that. And I think in the beginning, just to kind of leapfrog us or springboard us, not gonna ask you an actual question. I think what it is, I mean, it's kind of a question, but it's living authentically. I know that you have that in some of your write up and description, but I think just living authentically. I'll ask it in the question form in the sense of kind of what does that mean to you or your interpretive view, but I want you to just take it where you, if it's the wide angle or something specific, I'd love to just kind of start there.
Yeah, absolutely. It's great. This is the journey I've been on for many years. And when I think of living authentically, I think that we are always discovering our authentic self. It's always evolving. We're always creating ourselves in every moment. And there's this big spiritual question, who am I? Where it starts with. And I found on my own journey that, and I would imagine that this is true for so many people in the world, that we are collectively so conditioned by our society and by how we grew up and our traumas and all those things that it can be hard to find out what's really natural to us and belongs to us underneath all of
Mhm.
those masks or roles that we play, right? Or influences that we've had. And so many people find themselves in life in a position kind of saying, like, well, how did I get here? Am I even really happy? And
Yeah.
this is a question I was asking myself. And also, like, okay, did I actually choose these things? Or was
Mm.
it just chosen because I don't know, these are the things I thought I was supposed to do. This is what everybody else is doing. So I think it's like uncovering who we are beneath all the influence. And for me,
Yeah.
that comes down to who we are in our heart. And also, our
Yeah.
soul comes to this planet with a very unique energetic essence with particular things that it wants to express in this life and a particular kind of path that it wants to go on, but we usually start out in life kind of disconnected from that feeling, from that knowing of the heart and of the soul, and very caught up in the mind and all the noise and distractions and societies and the pressures of what we're supposed to do. So it's a big topic, right? Like
Yeah.
I'm still going there, and I
It
don't
is.
think you get to this point where it's like, this is the one authentic self that I am. For me, I see it more as this ever unfolding breadcrumb trail, and the indicators for me are by tuning into what lights you up, what you become
Mhm.
passionate about, what you're curious about. And each move that you follow on that breadcrumb trail reveals something new about you.
Yeah.
And yeah, yeah.
It's, so while you were saying that too, is kind of the word obligation came to mind early on when you were talking about it. And there's the kind of the path. And then there's like terms like Calvinism and things like that, which is a form of Christianity where it's, it's set in stone. Your life is programmed and you come in this life and, it's everything is already laid out. There's no decision to be made. You surrender to the, because whatever you do is going to, I'm just kind of being dramatic and, playful with it. And then there's the essence of the self. I like to call it the self mastery. And you had a beautiful way of saying it just there too. It was kind of the discovery process, the exploration. I think you kind of set it in, and in that journey of that self mastery, I think some of it is an unraveling of, let's just call it, those obligations or those programs or the things that were set in place in our tracks. We come into this world, there's the parents, there's the friends, there's the schools, and everybody puts this into the box. There's the cultural influences wherever you're at in the world. And they set us on a course of what is ours, and in a sense, we come in this time and space or whatever someone would believe of what that means to them. I don't want to say parameters or bumpers or thresholds. And the only interpretive value in the early stages is what we're fed to some degree. But there's that soul's knowing, that deep knowledge that at a young age you're born with. And I think even kids too, I remember being a very insightful child, confused by the world, people are telling me what I'm supposed to think and do and being confused by it. Then there's a journey of conformity, because that's the acceptance. That's how I find community through our DNA. I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent here, I want to come back to you, but those lineages of human development where community was, if you didn't have community, you died on your own to some degree, and some of those DNAs are built into us. So to gravitate and grab onto that stuff. But really, it's that soul's journey, man. That's, it's just talking in this little bit. I'm really seeing some parallel with myself too, because it's like that exploration, a desire for an awesome life, and what does that mean, and things that light you up, and chasing those, and falling on your face, and and then there's a term you kind of used, faith over, you didn't say it here, but I saw it in some of your writings, is faith over fear, in that arena, as well, to how do you embrace the change, and kind of stepping into those authentic, it's, I guess, kind of leading into that is, where are some of those steps over the fear into the faith, and where do those kind of
Yeah. Well,
pull?
I love what you said about community too, because I think about it in a similar way. And, even through our ancestral lineage, what we have in our DNA, way back in time. I mean, a lot of people were scared to be cast out of their communities, right? If they, for whatever reason, if they weren't contributing or um, acting in a particular way. And I think it carries right into today's world. And I think this is one place where a lot of fear comes in, is a lot of people are scared to be themselves, meaning make decisions that go against maybe what the community around them believes. And that community can be your
Yeah,
coworkers, your friends, what you see on television, whatever you consider. There's a fear to, like, people want to be accepted, they want to
yeah.
be embraced, people want to fit into a sense, they want to know they have a purpose and a place to plug into the world. And often, if you disagree with what's going on around you, and this is what I found in my early work environment, a lot of people are scared to, like, speak their true thoughts, or
Hmm.
express their true feelings. A friend of mine always says, that one cause of depression is the suppression of your expression. So
Ooh,
I
ooh,
think,
I like that.
yeah, I think most people are just not fully expressed and have never really been taught how, right? Because
Yeah.
we go through the school systems, we go through this path, we kind of learn the same subjects. You're told, well, you need a good job to make money, to be happy, to be secure, to be a provider, and all of that. So, when I think of faith over fear, it was like exiting that system took a lot of fear, because it's stepping into the unknown of who I am outside of that, the
Hmm.
unknown of if I'll be okay financially or supported. The worst case scenarios will come to mind when you're making kind of big moves to
Yeah,
exit what everything that you're leaving that known consciousness, right? And you have no idea what's going to meet you on the other side. So when I think of faith, I'm not here to tell anybody what to believe in, but I consider myself a man of deep faith, meaning that I know that woven within me is the same creative force that flows all through life. And whether you want to call that God, universe, source energy, whatever have you, I lead my life knowing that I'm tapped into that, and knowing that that energy is guiding me, is looking out for me, and is always speaking to me beyond what I see in my everyday reality. Faith is unseen. When I think of faith, I think of also like that scene in Indiana Jones where he's stepping off this like cliff. He puts his
oh
foot
yeah,
out, and the
yeah,
invisible bridge under him,
yeah,
like,
yeah,
he
yeah,
can't see the bridge, but it catches his foot. So faith is like knowing that I'll be okay, and trusting in that, and
yeah,
trusting in myself that I have what it takes, that I'm not alone, and I have an invisible team of forces, of spirit, whatever you want to call it, behind me, that's ensuring that I make it there. And so to discover who you really are, beneath everything we just talked about, all the influence, it takes faith going somewhere where you don't know where you're going, knowing that you're going to find what you're intending to find, which is yourself. And the faith and the fear show up and constantly along the way. But I
yeah,
find that each time I feared something and moved into it deeper, it would open my faith in a greater sense, because I always found that I was okay, or learn exactly what I needed to in that process.
yeah. I completely agree too. Is I've had those times where it is through, what's the way is through, and it kind of pops open that I didn't. There was no way I would have gotten there any other way. And the times with the faith for me, it's individualized in some sense too, where um, for me, like personally, like father, a husband, and all these things, and those dutiful obligations and stuff, and there were what the quote unquote requirements of the day. some of it's the resources, the resources of money. And there's this proverbial thought of like, did I chop enough wood to make it through the winter? And, dried out enough meats and beef jerkies to make it through, the hard times. And, just being silly with that mindset. But there's a survival sense there. So that faith, I know sometimes I recognize the faith in post, meaning that like I find myself really worked up and scared about the future potential loss of resources or not enough resources. And I get lost in that personally. And then I'm like, oh, I've lost faith. And I have to reconnect with that and understand that, no, I'm going to be good. And it's not always easy. I
No,
don't, you
no,
know,
it's not.
but those journeys, the recognitions and the awareness that come through those faith points are pretty powerful in
Yeah,
that sense.
and I feel you're just bringing up things for me as I'm listening to you. In speaking about like resources and faith, I find faith also when I'm truly anchored into faith. And we go in and out, right? We're not supposed to be these masterful beings that just have 1000% faith. Like that is the journey, developing faith, working through fear, all that. But I find that when I come back to faith and I'm able to remember that like I'm always provided for. And it may
Mm-hmm.
not look like money or resources in the way I thought, but even if it's
Yes.
family
Right.
members helping me out or something comes into my life and gives me exactly what I need in a way that I couldn't see it before, my heart comes to a place of peace. And when I, even if it's just for a moment and I have that feeling and I can breathe, I'm like, there's faith, there's love. Love is connected to faith. But when I'm in fight or flight and I'm in fear, I know I've kind of exited myself a bit and gone back into that survival mindset.
Yeah. And then you get that amygdala hijacking where you're really lost in that fight or flight and it's really deep survival. You're sitting in a deep survival state. It can be hard to kind of see out of that and see beyond that and stuff too. I really like something you said there too was about seeing things that I wouldn't have been able to see before, a different perspective. And on this journey too is the having this and having the insight and having the awareness as you develop those things and as that comes through this life, I call it the life of self mastery. The things I can see now that were the same, I'm looking at the same thing, but now I'm looking at it in a new perspective and a new understanding and a new depth. And again, I think some of that stuff is the dualities, and through that, you know, so maybe it starts from a singularity, an idea, a hope, a desire, whatever that is, a singularity and a spark into that perspective of the duality, understanding the two sides. And then the way I kind of see it too is that once you kind of create, and I'm not sold on the word balance in this side, but there's an understanding that it's really one of the two sides of the same coin. It comes back into a singularity again and a holistic understanding of ownership. So, through some of that journey is for in that perspective, I'm not going to be the same person. That's that Heraclitus quote of, no man walks through the same river twice because he's not the same man and it's not the same river. The perspective comes around and now it's a new world. I'm somewhere where I've never been before, and it may look the same, but I'm somewhere where I've never been before.
Yeah, I love that quote. I've never heard that before, and
No,
I
okay,
deeply agree. It's true. Like we're
yeah,
never the same person, and that's how I find so many of the life lessons come. Is like, oh, I've seen this before. I know how this is going to go, and then I got to remind myself, no, no, I'm not the same consciousness. I'm not the same person. It could just be here to kind of not trap me per se, but just give me a little bit of a test to be like, I feel like
absolutely.
I've seen this before, but there's new options, new perspectives. It was another podcast that I was on where this host said something that stuck with me. He said, when you shift your perspective, it's a holy moment. It's that
Mm,
important.
that's beautiful. Yeah, I really do think that perspective is. I actually did a podcast with a lady, and we were really fixed on talking quite a bit about the perspective and the perceptions and the self orientation. It kind of gets into how are we showing up? How are we received? Those aren't always the same things as well, because you have these different perspectives. You and I might be having a conversation, but you and I might be receiving it differently too. So there's those interactions. And as we go through, there might be reminders. And I'm going to just use what you were jumping on there too, as far as I see something, a similar pattern, maybe in somebody else. Now, my response might be something I did, in the past. I might be have a visceral like, "Ooh, this is icky. This isn't right." But this isn't the same conversation. You're not the same person as I had the interaction with the other one. So it's kind of how we show up in the world and how we're developing and co-creating with other people too
Absolutely.
in this process.
Totally.
So one of the things too is I keep referencing the things you wrote, so I do like the way you write, obviously, because the way we connected is through a platform, and that's so it's interesting. We only had a little bit of time to talk, but one of them was ditch the script. I kind of whether however you meant it. I know that just reading that little short snippet, I have a response. Again, how I receive it versus how you intended it might be the same, might not be the same. But I think ditch the script has maybe the common threads of some of the stuff we're talking about, and is there's the scripts we tell ourselves, there's the scripts that people imply and implore on us, and it's kind of how do you ditch that, how do you start, or where do you go, or what's this mindset with that in that sense too.
Yeah. Yeah, this word script can be applied in so many ways and perspectives, as you just alluded to. Um, and the way I see it now is there's scripts all around us that we're always choosing consciously or unconsciously. I find when you ditch the script, meaning maybe what I should do or the way it was
Mm,
laid out for me, whether that's a way to do or think about something or be a certain way, what we're told, when you can take a step back from that and begin to question
yeah.
this script, quote unquote, for lack of a better word, like, is this way really the best way for me? Finding the best way for you creates trust with yourself and
Mm,
coherence with your heart, and this faith that I speak of, and I feel really puts you in the driver's seat of your own life to make the best decisions for you. Now, that word script kind of came from the sales world that I used to work in,
sure.
because I was working sales jobs for 11 years. And in all honesty, I really hated most of my jobs. I went through a lot of suffering. I was always trying to find happiness and my self worth and what I perceived as success through this career of making a lot of money, of getting promoted, of being acknowledged, from my peers and things like that. And in sales, they used to always give you like phone scripts
Oh
for
man.
cold calling, and also
Oh, I cringe.
I
You
know,
said that,
I
and I
know.
just cringe. I just cringe. I just
Yeah. Like, it's like, how inspiring is that, right?
yeah.
And they give you models of like how many I would have to knock on, 50 business doors a day. And it was a lot of churn and burn, a lot of rejection. But with the phone calls, with the in-person cold calling, with the prospecting, all of it, they would say, if you do it this way, you would be successful. And
Hmm.
I just found that it didn't really work for me, and there was nothing inspiring about it. And I started to look at like, wow, the world is really in boxes. And especially
Yeah.
in the corporate world, as I experienced it, is like people show up and they're scared to say the wrong thing, scared to be themselves. We go through the same, what I considered boring meetings, like with just trying new ways to kind of motivate people. And it felt dry and empty to me. So I started to take my own path and kind of find out what was right for me in my life. And I even eventually realized I'm not a super money motivated guy. Look, I want success and abundance with money and prosperity and all that. Sales is typically it's a money driven business. It's a very reward driven type of
Hmm.
business. So that never pulled me along enough. I realized that it was more passion and purpose and feeling connected to what I was doing. That's what was my driving force. That's what would get me up out of bed in the morning. And I wasn't finding that in my current environment, So
Yeah.
like even today, it's even in speaking, right? If I'm creating like a talk or something like that, I could look around me and say, all right, what are other people saying about these topics, and what do people want to know? It's always good to do the research and find out what's out there, and maybe you can
Hmm.
use what resonates. But like, I find there's a deeper trust and cultivation with like your own skills with yourself when you just say, what do I think? What are
Yeah.
my words? What would I have to say about this? And the more that you trust and exercise that muscle, you create your own, I don't like the word script, but let's just say your own way.
I think that's a better way. Yeah, that's a way to say it. It's kind of the evolution of it from a script to your own to the way.
I love it. You
Yeah.
might have created a talk for me on that.
Yeah, no, I do because even playing, or not, I did, but I'm saying we did that together there, and that's in the sense that like it does create a way.
Yeah.
It's from the box to something that has no form, because this same subject is people. What's the form around your podcast? Because people want to put it in a box, like what is it about, and give me a category and give me a this, and it's not, nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with it. People, if somebody wants to help, they kind of need to understand something. So I totally get it. But I kind of got into a point where I jokingly said my kung fu has no form.
Ooh,
And
nice.
so but and then it kind of evolved into, my creative mind has no form, or my creative heart has no form. So within the creation, it has no form. And it's kind of, I'm not going to say it's more of a way than a rule. I was almost going to say it's a rule to live by. It's actually more of a way.
Hmm.
But going back to what we just kind of co-created in that sense, and to be the formless, or to be the nameless, and not be fixed on it. Because the script, when you said that, man, I cringe, because it's like this one fit all. And it's just
Yeah.
not how it's not how well. I mean, I shouldn't generalize, but I would just say many people, it's not going to resonate with many people. And it didn't resonate with you. I know that, any script, they never worked for me. It just felt inauthentic. And most of what we do when we're really, truly in our flow states, we're iterating through the process because it's intuitive and we're feeling our way through it. But once you niche into that box, I'm totally beaten up on that whole script thing. So
Yeah.
I'll end it after this, because it clearly got me going on the script. But I think that there is that sense of, in business, there's the oversimplification, and put people in categories. And the more gears and pulleys we put in place, the less we pay them, and the more rules they fit, and the parameters and everything else. And then what you do is you can create a world of playing not to lose versus playing to win. And you're just trying not to be noticed, or not putting your neck out too far. And you kind of alluded to people going silent. And the other podcast, you had done a quote. It was kind of like, it was almost the silence. But there's a saying too in business, when your best people become silent, that's basically the worst thing that can happen to the environment and stuff
Mm.
like that. So it's, those suppression or something like
Oh,
that.
friend, yeah, and he got it. I think it's a famous quote that's out there, and I'm not saying it perfect, but it's like, one of the causes of depression is the suppression of your expression. And
Suppression of your expression. That's
yeah,
exactly what it was.
yeah,
Thank you. That's that in itself too. Once you don't feel like you have a unique voice, I mean, I don't want to, again, not to generalize, but I'll just speak personally. I mean, nothing's gonna wilt my environment and diminish my flame more than me being just silenced and suppressed in that arena. Especially when we ask for great things in our lives, and we ask for a beautiful, amazing, adventurous, playful life, and to
yeah.
have the requirements and the obligations of the day, kind of implied or implored on us.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you feel this topic so deeply, and even, it's all in the description of your podcast, right? And just like creativity,
Yeah.
being outside the formless and who we are. And, it's like also our life force energy, like what we're literally made of is meant to be this expression of God, creator, that energy, whatever you want to call it, is expressing itself through us. And we're all individually unique, and have this massive potential, but humans just haven't been taught that. So once, I feel like there's this thing, like you said before, like people want to be able to understand what you do, so we need words. And then for me, it starts feeling like boxes and kind of confinement when you start
Yeah.
labeling everything. And we talked about even the word like coach, right? Like, okay, I'm limited now to just this word and I have to explain it to people. But even through things like religion, right? And political systems, and everything that has like a category, a box. This is the rules. This is the way it goes. And I'm not here to offend, anybody's faith driven beliefs or
Hmm.
anything like that. But, I noticed for myself that the more I tried to conform to these ideas that were given me, the more I felt like I was dying a little more inside.
Sure.
So that suppression of my expression, because I traded it off and gave it away and gave my power away, really never even went inside to find what it was, just took these ways that were given to me. It really takes away from like what we're meant to be and who we're meant to be in this world. And a lot of people will find themselves in life like, oh my God, I'm miserable, but I don't know why. And I think that is where the inner compass in our hearts is starting to say, all right, well, it all comes down to the way you feel. So something
Hmm.
inside of you is telling you that you're not in alignment with your true self. You might be over here like chasing something that's just not meant for you, when really you could take a left or a right over here and have a much more beautiful experience of your life.
Yeah. I think too is that, having those awareness, having those, or even to someone that's on hindsight, maybe a reflection point that you're like, you can kind of see and feel, and just something's incongruent. I think sometimes too is some of that can get misplaced, meaning that, for example, is chasing the money, and money's beautiful and it's incredible to have, and it creates ease as a process in certain aspect of your lives. But overall, it's not necessarily the answer, because if you're not whole or feeling content, or at ease in certain situations, having more money might be able to buy you things or whatever. But at some level, the money, I think, represents, and again, not to overgeneralize, I use myself as an example. Sometimes the money represents to like a freedom, or not having the subject of these overcast responsibilities, and somehow that's going to give me freedom. It's not about the money; it's about the lack of these other things.
Mm.
My direction of, if I chase the money, that's cool, but I'm not actually chasing that. I'm chasing a freedom over here, or an ease of process, or an ease of my heart, whether good, bad, or ugly, or indifferent, whether imagined or real. I'm still creating actions around that.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes it can be misdirected, like, oh well, this is the path of it, so I'm going to focus on this next step, or this version of the barrier of my lack, or the barrier of what's holding me back in my life. I think some of those things can be a little bit, misdirected as well too. And we can get lost. I'll be honest with you, we can get lost in those too. I've gotten lost on the seeking and chasing the wrong paths in my life as
Mm.
well, thinking that was going to give me the light, that was going to give me the enlightenment,
Can I,
have you.
can I ask you an example
Please.
that happened to you?
Yeah. So, I think what it is too is I had about 10 years ago, I had a business that closed down. It went poorly. Those resources in my life diminished quickly. Have wife and the kids, and the dutiful husband, and the dutiful father, and all that stuff. So it felt like the rug got pulled up underneath me. So then what it was this chasing of, thinking money was the issue. And there were different levels of ease and different levels of pain that I was experiencing, and those obligations. I wasn't chasing things that lit me up. I wasn't chasing things that, truly inspired me. It was the idea of, just the idea of consuming and acquiring money. I would say too,
Yeah.
and it kind of burned me up, and that having that phoenix where you get burned and crash to the ground, and having to build yourself back up along the way, realizing it's really the heart space and the heart center, and investing into that. And that takes no money whatsoever to invest in yourself and your own heart space. So, that journey in itself was, I mean, I'm compressing it quite, quite heavily, but that's an example of me chasing that, and obviously it brought out the money right away. So that was, that was kind of that journey.
Yeah. Yeah, the money one's tricky, man. It's so ingrained in all of us as a society, and it's look, I'm still figuring that one out myself, but I think like what you said before, just it wasn't really the money, but it was more about like how you feel. Like
Yeah.
we want to feel a certain way, and I feel even that
Thank you. That's a better way to say it.
yeah,
Yeah.
behind like relation. Okay, sometimes it's like, well, I really want this relationship. Why? Maybe it's because I want to feel love and acceptance. Maybe I want to feel
Mhm.
connection. Maybe I really want to feel freedom, or I want that feeling that I can do anything that I want to do. And yeah, I agree. Like money for sure frees that up, but there's like a dance and a respect and a learning, about money. But I feel everything is also just an extension of us, from within. So there's multiple ways to get money, and you can make a lot of money doing something you're really not happy with, and then you got to keep it all up and sustain it even when you got the money. Or it might take a little longer, in another sense, but maybe there's something that, resonates more with your heart.
Yeah.
And a lot of money can come from that as well, and can feel a lot more, yeah.
I was going to say too, while you're saying that, triggered the memory of, in
Hmm.
part of that process too, is kind of the identity, or the identification of what I thought the world thought of that I was.
Mm.
So there's we get these imprints, and this goes back to the script, not to make it about the script. I don't want to overkill our time with that, but a little bit of that imprint of what the world thinks, it was at the time. I was like, okay, I was a small business owner, and There were things I had, disposable income, and I traveled a lot, and and maybe perception wise, I showed up in the world as a certain, and maybe I let people think that I was even maybe more well off than I was. So I created this persona around that. So and it was in that time was the cracking the and the shattering of that identity as well too. So so that identification was stripped away in the situation. So now I was formless, but I also didn't have the faith to connect the to tissue to
Yeah.
anchor to. So it was this lost thing, and I tell this story as only as an example, not to talk about myself, but I believe that people can identify with that. When you have there's big shatterings of love, health, money, family, community, all those things, and they're real to us, whether again real or imagined. I think they're real to us, and those experiences can foundationally, if we're focused on the peripheral up here and our foundation isn't completely secure, um, we don't have those anchor points and kind of float around and really get lost in it, into the depression, into the embarrassments, into the guilts, and those can be really, really deep. And for me, that situation too, just to be frank, it took me a long time and a long journey to really heal.
Would you say you found some kind of faith through that process?
Absolutely. I always had it, but it looks different now than it did for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And I think that's a real important thing as part of the iteration and part of the finding the way and finding find through the journey.
Yeah, faith is, I mean, everyone's going to have a different definition of what faith is, but I feel that faith for a lot of us just starts as an idea and it
Mm-hmm.
doesn't really become faith until it's tested. And often that is a breaking, kind of like what you just described, where the
Yeah,
rug is pulled out from under us, where life on a random Tuesday kind of hits you out of left field with something you didn't see coming. um, then your faith is tested. And sometimes it's years before you even begin to understand
yeah,
what life is showing you. But those moments are, I believe, just the most important moments in life, however painful that they are. For me, it's like they're the openers of faith, and faith
yeah.
is like a teacher through that, is what I've learned in my life.
Do you feel like I'm gonna uh, let me ask you the question, and I have some thoughts around it too. But can you build faith?
Mm.
Can faith be built?
Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
yeah. Absolutely. I feel that because you could say faith in what, right? Like faith in
yeah,
myself. What if I believe in no higher power? For me, it's in a higher power and in myself. That is one and the same for me. But I feel that it's important for us to bring ourselves in a certain way energetically in life to match whatever it is that we want to call in. Meaning, you can just start with emotions, right? If I want to be passionate, if I want to find more passion in my life, then I need to create passion and show up
mm,
passionately, even to the mundane things. And you cannot call in what you haven't cultivated inside of you. So when you show up passionately, more of that passionate energy and things to be passionate about in life find you, because you're a now match for that frequency. I find faith no different. That when you bring yourself, when you pray, I'll just use myself as an example. When I come forth and I ask the universe for what I want, and then I say thank you, and I know it's happening, or God, thank you, I know it's happening. Okay, what do I need to do? And the first intuitive hit that I get, if I don't act on it and I throw it by the wayside and then I just come back and just ask God for something when I'm in dire need and I'm begging, like that's not true faith. That's like you being desperate and going out on a
mm,
limb when you just want to reach for anything. Faith is like practicing what you've received, showing up in faith, being like, okay, I can't see how this is going to go. Man, things seem really hard right now. But the way I speak to myself, right? The way that I practice, the way that I bring myself in my way of being to every moment and say, for example, okay, you know what? This isn't exactly like I've seen it, but I know that I'm right where I'm supposed to be because this is what faith tells me. God tells me that everything around me is teaching me something, opening something in me, guiding me closer to my true path. The more that I can instill that recognition, that belief, and then practice that belief, like bring myself to the table of life in that way, I strengthen my faith. And the universe gives me more synchronicity in return, more things line up that give me the evidence of that faith. Like, wow, it did work out. Oh my God, I am being led on this path. Wow, like things are coming into my life I do enjoy. I feel it's really like a 50-50 partnership with this,
Sure.
energy that moves through us, and how we choose to connect it and to acknowledge and recognize it.
Oh man, that's beautiful. Yeah, and you did. There's a couple little things too, as I was picking up on as far as like saying it in a different way, but it was basically I heard kind of the celebrating those and acknowledging those.
Hmm.
I don't want to call them victories, but the identification of proof or the identification of the recognition in there, and then kind of celebrating those. I'm saying a little bit different words, but those are the things I was kind of picking up too, because I think too collectively, if we see some of the we create action, we have faith in it. We're reliable. We can rely on ourselves to continue to show up and do those actions. So now we have faith in ourselves. And again, those synchronicities, those alignments, we're more aware of them. So we're starting to notice them and receive them when maybe we would have been closed off about, depending on the perspective in the past. And then as they come through, celebrating those small wins and being great, and that which is a form of gratitude, I
Yeah.
think too.
I just got a huge chill when you said celebrating them. And actually, celebrating is one of my favorite practices because this helps you sync up with faith, with who you are, and all of that is the gratitude, like you said, and the positive acknowledgement, so that the
Yeah.
automatic brain doesn't focus on just what's going wrong, because the energy builds on whatever you focus on. But also, what came up for me in listening to you is faith in ourselves. A lot of people don't have faith in their own abilities, right? Or their
Hmm.
ability to come up with the resources or to be effective or to have the skills that they want to have. How do you do that? You need evidence in your life. You can't just
Yeah.
think your way through it. Thinking it and positive talk and affirmations and all of that is a part of the equation, but we're still in these bodies that are very 100% programmable. So you need the evidence in your life. And how do you build the evidence? That brings me back to building faith or courage through fear. Every time you fear something, if you be courageous and you take the step anyway, and you do that multiple times, then you can say, wow, you know what? The last 3 times that I did this, I was courageous and it worked out. So now I have faith in myself that I am
Yeah.
courageous and that when I step in, things work out. Whereas in the past, and I know this was true for me, I held a story that said things don't work out, or when I go for
Mhm.
the big moment, I crash and burn. But we've got to like create the new experiences to restore that faith and trust within ourselves.
Yeah. There was, while you were saying that too, is like there's kind of the creation of that is and understanding. I think there's a belief too, as far as like, do I believe whatever it is, whatever I'm thinking of, or the spark or the inspiration do I think it's possible? Meaning that, like, do I believe that this is possible in this corporeal world? And then the next to that would be, do I believe it's possible for me? Because those might not be the same. I might think that it's possible, but it's externally, it's possible for somebody else. But if I believe it's possible for me, it's possible in the world to actually create this, and it's possible for me, and then having that self worth to identify and kind of draw that in and work towards it and cumulatively.
Yeah. And I would love to just quickly share because every time you speak, it brings something up for me. And it's like,
Yeah,
I had this question too, just share a quick story about when I went traveling. I used to think I had to have $1 million to go traveling, and it was like some far off pipe dream. Like it just wasn't an option for me. I
yeah.
traveled the world for 4 years, but it
Oh my god.
started with me not having any idea of how it would happen. I wrote a letter to God, and this was my experiment. I said, God, bring me all the resources I need, the people, the geographic locations, the financial resources, the insights, the teachers, everything that I'm going to need to bring me through this journey. And on the other side, I want to be connected to my calling in life, something that fits me better, and not having any idea how this was going to happen. That was my experiment. I threw it out there and I said, let me see what faith really is, and jumped off the deep end and,
That's
and
really
and
cool.
watched it kind of build before me. And it took a really long time and tested my patience like crazy, but
That's really cool,
it
man.
showed it.
Yeah, that's well here, you know what? I just kind of almost like went in complete opposition to what I was just going to say. What I was going to say is like, wow, that's a really big thing. And by saying that, I think in my head I wasn't saying that. Wow, that's not. It's like almost that's possible, but like oh somebody else. Like I just externalized it with you. I'm like 4 years. I'm like that's amazing. I'm like oh I can't do that. I literally had that thing just as we're
Right?
talking about it. I'm like holy cow. So, but that's really cool. But the way you broke that down, where it's the resources, the mentors, the insights, the cap, the the capital, the time, the know-how, all the things that the threads that go in there, the ability to be, safe travels and how to get around and navigate languages, like
Yeah.
all those little elements, to pull all that together. That's outstanding. So that's a very, I'm just going to say that is a big thing, but maybe it's not a big thing. Maybe I shouldn't put a size because there's a judgment to it, but that's a really incredible thing with a lot of variance to it.
Yeah, I thought for the longest time it was not possible for me, and that
Yeah.
belief kept me in a place that I was unhappy for a very, very long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think, you know what, to jump on that too, because I think we have elements of that, I will generalize in that sense, is that it's time can test our faith, in the sense that it's not showing up. It's like, oh man, I'm feeling it. I'm seeing it. I'm having, I'm envisioning it. I just know it's possible. I believe and you keep going on, and it's like, then you don't see the evidence and you're like, man, and it depends on what it is, but like there's things. And then the victimhood, this is part of the human journey. It can set in. And
Yeah.
how long you linger there, how you respond is, that's a different story because we can change our responses and we can work through that stuff. But we have the ability, we're very creative creatures. And one of the creative part is the extraordinary stuff we create. And we could also create very tumultuous thoughts as well that feed into it. I guess kind of staying on the path and continuing keeping the candle lit without getting into the victimhood or not falling off the track. What's your kind of thought in that arena?
Yeah, well, I think I once heard that patience is the highest virtue you can have on a spiritual path, and it was true for me because I wrote that letter, and my whole intention of going travel was to find my purpose. And I have different views on what purpose is. It's not so defined for me anymore. We have a
Sure.
lot of purposes. But I was like 3.5 years into this journey, and I said, I've been traveling the world for 3 years. I'm like, I still don't know what I'm supposed to do. Travel was the purpose. It was the
Yeah. Yeah.
greatest experience. I lived a whole lifetime that I would do 10 times over, the greatest gift of my life. But I knew that I wanted to come into a profession, something that I can give all this back through some kind of way and I could be passionate about. And it was like between 3.5 and 4 years where storytelling was dropped into my life. I didn't even know what
Ooh.
it was. And someone asked me to host an open storytelling night in Peru where I was living. So I got to start emceeing this event and sharing my story on stage for the first time. And it just hit me. I was like, I'm supposed to be a speaker. I'm like, I've always wanted to. I just never could admit that to myself, or I didn't know the path to get there. I didn't see it as a
Mm.
reality. And little things, just more of that breadcrumb trail I was speaking of, started kind of coming on until a mentor finally came on my path, and I took him up on his program, and it brought me back to the US, and I got to like speak on a stage for the first time. And I was so lit up. I was like, wow, this is it. I had to go on my hero's journey and do all this traveling to create my story, to learn what it was that I would share and teach moving forward. And I've always wanted to speak, and in this moment of
Mm.
my life, kind of here it is. But to go back to your question, it takes, there's this old story called 3 Feet from Gold. It's like a famous story about I think the California gold rush or something. And
Yeah.
these guys that were digging for like the longest time, they were 3 feet away from having a breakthrough to the gold on the other side of the wall, and they
Oh yeah. Yeah.
stopped and they turned around. Somebody else
There-
came through, they dug 3 feet and they found
There's another
gold.
story like that too, and I think it's called Acres of Diamonds.
Okay,
And I
yeah.
think somebody had like a land, some similar thing where they own the land and they sold it, or something happened like that too. And then I think that isn't it somewhere with the alchemist, like coming back to it's a journey of back to home,
Yeah,
and that's really where the treasure is. And
totally. I think
yeah,
there's many stories about that, but
yeah,
what comes to me now, what I would say is I have a lot of ways that I can answer that question, but in this moment, it's like if we can focus on what we're building in the journey, that's what I found like sustained me. When I
Yeah,
focused, like you said, on the gratitude and I looked at all the magical moments I was having and all that I was learning about myself, and even at my values, saying faith is my highest value. So I've got to trust that it's not
yeah,
up to the timing that I wanted and the control that I wanted. And I think if more people can understand that and surrender that there is a greater divine plan in action all of the time, it's never supposed to happen in our timing because it would be predictable, right? And as we said,
yeah,
we are these creative, unique expressions that are here to really go on a journey in this life. So it's faith, it's focusing on what am I learning along the way? How am I developing? Who am I becoming? And not
mhm,
so much focusing on the end destination because that can be a trap like anything else, like the money, house, cars, job, relationship,
yeah,
whatever. If you can find the magic and the value in what you're doing and develop some willpower and fortitude, and then remember your values, and for me, value is faith, it just kept me going.
yeah. No, that's beautiful. The process, and even some of it's for me. I'm just gonna. It's not goal setting or not goal setting. I'm not getting into that, but I was gonna say some of it's just kind of creating a waypoint, and like that's the general direction I want to head. And maybe I've got headwinds, or maybe I've got I don't know all the sailing terms, so back winds,
North
side winds,
Star.
whatever it. Yeah, and some of it is figuring it out along the way and the iteration of that and kind of mastering the process and finding that when you're really finding fun in that too, like everybody has their own little things and hobbies and things like that. I found it like woodworking and I really like, just figuring it out and screwing up, like, making all those little mistakes and like, but if I was fixed on the end thing, I would get very frustrated and might even quit. But that's just an example from, of me. Everybody has many different things they like, but it's, just kind of figuring it out and those visceral, the feeling of the process.
Yeah, you remind me, what's that old proverb, like not fishing for a man, but teach a man to fish, kind of. And
Yeah,
most people today want it to be done for them, meaning, or I don't want to make that a blanket statement. Like people are down to work hard to get what they want. But again, it's usually that feeling that they want at the end of it. And they kind of focus
yeah,
on that and like, just get me the thing quicker, right? When like all the
and that's a
gold is in learning to fish for yourself.
yeah, and
And
that's a great point. We're fixed on the feeling at the end of the rainbow
mhm.
and that journey. And if it gets slightly turned, and you're like you become so rigid on the path, and it's not going to necessarily end up. And you kind of mentioned something like this too. It doesn't always end up how we intend it to. It generally, I'll be honest with you, I feel it ends up even better than we intended. But yeah, if you're fixed on that end result, you're so rigid, you miss the little turns and the tricks of its iteration and evolution. And if you get veered off course, the path could break. And then it's, the frustration and the devastation of that too,
Yeah,
getting
you kill the
overly fixed.
mysticism in it. Yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
I had some of the most depressed times of my life in the middle of that travel. That took everything
Okay.
in me to keep going. So like, yeah, it's just that's another thing that just proved it to me. You know, wow,
Yeah.
made it through that, kept going, kept stayed the course.
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah, those are the times too, because but that makes such an incredible story. Kind of that end iteration, but just to, I don't want to be redundant on it, but so I'll kind of end it with that. Um, but man, thank you so much, Michael. I really appreciate you jumping on here today. This was super fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun for me too, man. We flowed
Yeah.
pretty well together.
Yeah. So where can people find you, or work with you, or what's the best way?
Yep. The best and most direct way is to go to my website, which is wakeupwithmike.com. There's different ways to contact me there. I'm a guide for people, so I do a lot of one on one work and help people tap into their own wisdom, their own ways, and develop the confidence and the courage to do that. There's ways to reach out to me. If you're interested in me speaking at one of your events, and I'll be coming out with some workshops and things too. And then I'm on all the social media platforms at Wake Up with
Very
Mike.
cool. Yeah, and I'll connect you. I'll link you to any of these shows as well too, so that hopefully that'll help people to connect with you.
Cool.
Awesome again, man. Thank you, Michael.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. Appreciate it.